Hello, and welcome to this artistic lesson on drawing portraiture. My name is Mr. Andrea, if you don't know me, and I'm going to be doing the first part of this lesson, and my wife, the lovely and amazing artist Cassie Mazur, is going to do the second part of this lesson, the actual drawing portion of it for you. And the reason I'm standing in front of a chalkboard that says algebra in an Arabic-inspired script is because we're going to do a portrait of this guy, Muhammad ibn Musa Al-Khwarizmi is his full name. And this guy is the father of algebra, as it were. So in fact, as we're making this lesson, we are in the middle of creating a math block on algebra. And so this is, this would be like a supporting artistic lesson about the subject. Now, I like to put everything we do in historical context because not only am I a teacher, but I call myself a historian, really. And I love to think about everything we study in the curriculum in the context of its place within the whole arc of the human story. That, to me, is how I conceive of the world, that I find fascinating. So I would be remiss if I gave you this artistic lesson without some introduction to this extraordinary individual. Now, I called him the father of algebra, and an important part of algebra is something called the algorithm, which is, you could say, a mathematical recipe for figuring something out. But actually, the idea of an algorithm extends beyond working with numbers. A recipe for baking cookies, or sweet potato brownies, or lemon meringue pie. That's an algorithm, right? It's a very specific series of steps with certain amounts or ratios of ingredients that have to be kept during the process. It's a very specific algorithm. The same would be true for, say, when they extract oil, crude oil out of the earth, and they want to make it into jet fuel or diesel or gasoline for cars, right? Or even oil to heat homes. There's a lot of homes that have oil heat. There's a very specific algorithm for what they have to do to that crude oil to transform it into something usable by different combustion engines. Okay? Predicting the weather. Like, do you ever go on a weather app or the Weather Channel or something? They use very sophisticated algorithms to predict that on Thursday it's going to be 35 degrees and partly cloudy at 10 a.m. And the wind will be 8 miles an hour from the west. Okay? So algorithms are just sort of interwoven into our daily life. And guess what? The word algorithm comes from Al-Khwarizmi. It's a Romanized version of this name. So this guy is like, whoa, so super important for so much of the math that is practiced today that has helped us master the world in the ways that we have. I mean, it's extraordinary. Okay? And so Al-Khwarizmi was born in 780 CE in Khwarazm, which is a border region between modern-day Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. And I find that part of the world just fascinating because it's one of the most ethnically and culturally diverse regions. That whole, you could call it, it's part of the Silk Road, really, that runs from China into Europe. But especially the Middle East and going into Eurasia, it's just so fascinating. I mean, Al-Khwarizmi was a Muslim. I don't exactly know his ethnicity, but it was probably something like Persian. But you had, Arab Muslims at that time, you had Persians, you had Turkmen, various Turkic peoples that have come out of the Asian steppe. And even amongst the Turkic peoples, there are, there's lots of different varieties. You have, like Kazakhs, they're even related to Mongolians. And then you have the Turkish people that live in Turkey. This is fascinating to me. The Muslim world is very diverse in that respect. And he was lucky enough to be born into the golden age of Islam, very close to its inception. And it lasted from about the 700s till around the 1300s CE. And it was a flourishing of knowledge amongst other things, literature as well. And at the age of 33, Al-Khwarizmi made his way to Baghdad, modern-day Iraq, and the famous House of Wisdom. That was a place where it was sort of like the Olympics or the World Championship place for scholars, okay? If all the greatest athletes in the world meet at the Olympics every 4 years, whether it be the winter or the summer, of course they alternate. I think of 2-year cycles between them. All the greatest scholars in the known world would have found their way to the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, presided over at that time when Al-Khwarizmi arrived by Caliph Mamun ibn Rashid. And he stayed there for 20 years from about 813 to 833 CE. And he was a genius. He was born a genius. And he produced a number of books, but 3 of them that really stick out. One is called the Compendious Book on Calculation and Completion. That's the English name. It would have been titled something very different in Arabic, but that's the that's the translation. And this was a comprehensive text on algebra. And so he was, you could say, the father of algebra. Now, it's important to note that he did not necessarily create all of those ideas himself, but he systematized them in one place, which is really helpful for cultures to come later. He also wrote a book on Hindu Arabic numerals. That is to say, basically the numbers we use today. Now, before that time, in, for example, Europe, they would have been using Roman numerals. Can you imagine trying to do all the math we do today with Roman numerals? It would drive you out of your mind, right? So this Hindu Arabic numeral system, again, while it wasn't created by Al-Khwarizmi, he systematized it, and subsequently it made its way, to really around the world, okay, as the sort of ideal way to do math, because it introduced the idea of place value, okay, and now we could, work with bigger and bigger numbers more easily. And then Al-Khwarizmi also produced a book on geography that improved upon the earlier Roman geographer Ptolemy's a map of the world. It greatly improved upon it by using a systematic grid system. Okay? And so Al-Khwarizmi and others who were working in the House of Wisdom, many of them did this work of taking knowledge that was already around in some form or another and perfecting it and systematizing it and putting it into compendia that, that was kind of like their great gift to human culture, at that time. And it did greatly impact human culture in Europe, later in the New World, even going into Asia and Africa for centuries to come, and still does today. Okay? So that's a little background on this extraordinary individual who lived during the golden age of Islam and was sort of an iconic figure of that time and place. Okay? All right, so now we want to go and do the artistic work. All right? So let's go to that now. All right, so I'm going to do the title, and then Cassie is going to do the drawing. I just want to show you what materials we're using. So I've got these skin tone Lyra colored pencils. They don't have to be Lyra, but these are just helpful because, you know, there's like all these different tones here, which is useful for drawing, you know, human beings. These come from a set, and this is the box cover, woodless colored pencils. These are woodless, and they are Koh-i-Noor, hard to move. You can get them in different places, but really you can use any colored pencils. I'm going to start out for the title with a dark brown, which is called natural sepia, and this kind of orangey brown, which is called burnt sienna. And so you can just follow me on this. Okay, I'm going to do that fun font here. My father and his family are actually native Arabic speakers, but unfortunately never taught me, much to my chagrin. But such as it is, my father is also a bit of an algebra genius of his own. Something that I suppose comes with the territory of being from that part of the world. My dad actually is from Baghdad, where the House of Wisdom was. Okay, so algebra, and then I'm going to do Al-Khwarizmi's name just under here. You just follow me here. Now the W is kind of challenging. You go up and then up even more. A little loop over there, and then another little W above it. It's gorgeous language to write. Khwarizmi. Let's see here. Of course, this isn't writing proper Arabic. It's just from English. Inspiration, Arabic-inspired, Romanized inspiration. All right, so algebra and Al-Khwarizmi. And so I'll invite you now to pause and finish the title before we go on to the face. So go ahead and pause and do that now. All right, assuming now that you've got that covered, I'm going to turn it over to Cassie. She's going to take it from here.
Hi everyone. So let's go ahead and get started on drawing a portrait. So some of you may have drawn portraits before, some haven't, but you will notice that the human face has certain proportions, meaning that the ratio, placement of where the eyes are, the nose, the mouth, these all have a certain way that they get placed. So what I'm doing now is I'm just making a note of the top of the head and then the bottom of the chin, because he's got hat on, So, okay. So what I would recommend too is using a 2B or 3B pencil and drawing lightly so that if you make mistakes, you can easily erase. So for demonstration purposes, I'm gonna make my lines darker, but I want your lines to be very light so that you can easily erase them, because we don't want to see all these lines in the final portrait. Okay, so how do okay, so typically the eyes are placed in the middle. So hit the top of his head, I would say, is about here, but this is sort of where his hat is. Okay, so about halfway is here. So the placement of his eyes. And then we're gonna, so if this is the placement of his eyes, we're going to do a third of the way down for his nose, third of the way down for his mouth. And all right, so I like to start with the eyes, sort of these almond shape eyes. And so I'm sort of just looking at the edge of the face here, since we're doing a 3/4 turn and not a front and facing. So it's a little trickier because you have to look at the distance between where the edge of the eye is to the edge of the head, the face. Let's see. His beard. All right, go ahead and pause and catch up as needed. Go ahead and define the eyes, the iris, and the pupil. Make sure you leave a little white space where the pupil is. If you need to erase some places to fix the proportion, please do. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna erase this center line because I don't need it anymore. And I'm gonna work on adding value to the portrait. So value being the darks, where the shadows fall on the face, and the highlights of the face, so the lighter areas. So I like to use a Prismacolor Magic Rub eraser. You may have other erasers. This is called a kneading eraser, which is really nice. All right, so for the skin, we're gonna need a light value, a medium value, and a darker value for the skin. So I like to start with the lighter areas. If you ever notice, like, oh, something looks off, it's okay to go ahead and fix it. The corner of the mouth goes the corner with the eye here. So right now I'm just using my darker value in the shadow area of the face. And again, don't worry about this, being perfect. We're all learning here. And there's sort of a shadow on this side of his face. There's a shadow of the cheekbone. So go ahead and pause and catch up as needed. So the light source is coming from this side of the face and the shadow is on this side. I'm using my pencil to help define some of these shadows. So it's okay to use a combination of graphite and colored pencil. There's a wavy beard here. Just gonna use my graphite here to kind of get in the structure of his beard, mustache. I'm kind of just doing like a general dark background for the beard, and then I can go back and erase to add some highlights as needed. So hair can be a little bit tricky because we don't view it the same, because it's like these thin strands, right? So we don't necessarily view it the same as, like, let's say a hand, like the solidness of a hand. So, but what we have to do is think of the hair as one form or one structure that does in fact have form. It has shadows, it has midtones, and it does have highlights. And that will help give the beard some dimension. And so what I'm gonna do is just take my eraser and kind of smear, kind of fill it in, make it more of a solid like form. And then I can go back in with my eraser and take away some of that graphite to give it a little bit of some volume here. And you can actually use your eraser to take away colored pencil as well. So let's say you want to make an area lighter, but you already colored it with colored pencil. That's okay. Just take your eraser and you can pick up some of that color up and off as needed. Alright, let's go in here and give these eyes a little more definition. I'm using my graphite pencil. It's more precise. And again, you can view the face as a series of shapes, right? Let's not forget about his mouth. Give his eyes some color here. So for the, just take a moment and catch up as needed. What I want you to do is focus on shading in the face. So you have your highlights, your midtones, and your shadow, your deep shadow. And also do that with the hair as well. Like I said, color it in, and then take your eraser. This kneading eraser is wonderful. You can buy a set, like a Prismacolor set. It comes with different erasers and different types of pencils. And if you lift too much up, you can always add more back. Take a moment, catch up. All right, so now I'm gonna focus on the body and his hat, and we'll do a light background color as well. A sort of keeping with a sepia tone, sort of neutral palette here. And again, feel free to use whatever color you want for his jacket. I'm just gonna keep with a neutral palette. Sort of the folds in his shirt. So as you know by now, the harder you press, the darker, the more intense the color, and then with less pressure, you've got a lighter value of the pencil. So light pressure where you don't want a lot of color, you just want a light value, and then harder pressure on that pencil with where you want the darker value. And it's good to like use different colored pencils and layer them on top of each other because it gives a little more depth to the portrait. I'm not So again, just looking at the picture here and trying to pinpoint those shadow areas and those highlights. And you may find it's helpful to squint your eyes a little bit. Because a lot of times when we draw, our eyes get fixated on details and we don't look at the overall picture itself. We just focus on trying to make that one little eyeball perfect, or the one little, you know, whatever it may be, and then we miss out on essentially capturing just the overall essence of whatever we're trying to draw or paint. And I'm pressing pretty hard on the pencil right now. Sort of has these folds in his shirt. Kind of an interesting garment that he's wearing. So I'm just going to keep going here with this garment, but feel free at any time to, you know, pause the video to catch up. But essentially I'm just doing the dark areas and then adding the, what is it, sepia, a reddish brown terracotta color. And as you know, like if you use, like for example, I use this terracotta color, I'm gonna just add a little bit of that terracotta back into his skin, because it's good to, if you use one color in a part of the painting, it's good to kind of incorporate it into another part to kind of like tie in your work, if that makes sense. All right, so go ahead and finish this and then we'll work on the hat and the background next. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and define, use my dark pencil here, define the folds in his turban. Just starting with the major folds here to begin with. I'm just going to start filling in those darker areas. But making sure to leave white space, because it's a lot harder to, once you've pushed down really hard on that pencil, it's much harder to erase it. So I'm just going ahead and following the direction of the cloth with these lines. I'm like pushing down harder on the pencil and then easing up as lighter pressure as I go around, if that makes sense. So I push and then I ease off the pressure. So if I push hard, I get a thicker line, and then if I ease off the pressure, I get a thinner line. You guys are doing great. Thanks for sticking with this, because portraits are not easy, even for adults. We see people every day, but when it comes to drawing them, it's not always as intuitive as we think. All right, so now I've got the major structure, I've got the direction of the lines. Oh, that's really important. So the direction of the lines help create the volume, right? It helps show like the form. It helps describe the form of the hat or the fabric. Then I'm gonna take my mid-tone. Let's see. Just kind of fill that in around the darker areas. Meanwhile, I'm leaving space for the highlights. Yeah, I would say, you know, with whatever you draw, just always make sure that you pay attention to the direction of the light, what direction the light is coming from. So in this case, you know, do you think the light is coming from this side, or do you think it's coming from this side? And how can you tell? Well, I'll give you a hint. Let's look at where the shadows are, and let's look at where the highlights are. So that should give you an idea of where the light is coming from, right? Because you can see all the light highlights are on this side, and then the deeper shadows are on this side. All right, go ahead and pause and finish his hat. Again, making sure you've first establish those dark, shadowy areas, paying attention to the direction of the lines, filling it in with a mid-tone, and then leaving space for the highlight. All right, so finally we're just gonna give the portrait a little bit of color in the background. I'm gonna go with something light because the portrait itself has a very heavy dark value. So in order to create contrast and have the figure pop, again, I am just going to keep the background very light. So go ahead and pick a light color. And again, I'm using, you probably can't see it very well, but again, I am not pressing hard on the pencil at all. So quick, even strokes, light pressure. This takes a lot of practice because what could end up happening is, for example, I'll just show you on this piece of paper here. It's not a good example. When you go to shade, like let's say you want to get even pressure, okay? Press hard, and as you ease off the pressure, it's going to create a lighter value, right? So oftentimes what happens is people, they go like this. So what you want to do is go very, very slowly, and don't move down the line too fast, if that makes sense. So hard pressure, and then as you slowly move down, ease off that pressure for a lighter value. I hope that makes sense. So you could practice this. It's a good skill to have. So, you know, it's okay. I would recommend mixing up the direction. So if you're going vertically, then you switch to horizontal. So again, go ahead and just continue this process with a light color and go all the way around the background. All right, go ahead and pause and catch up. Okay. So I'm just going to give the background a little more dimension. And you can play around with this. So maybe around the figure you want it to be a little bit darker and then lighter. You could do that. So I'm pressing the pencil a little bit harder, closer to the face, and then less as it goes out. You can always, again, take this handy eraser, which is fabulous as a blending tool, and also to pick up color if you would like to have a stronger highlight there. Trying to think. Now, if you're looking at this and going, well, I want the background to have a little more depth, you could, it's optional, take it a step further. And darken it just a hair. And you can see that adds a little more depth to the background. I always love layering different colored pencils. So typically we think, okay, I'm going to pick this colored pencil, and this is in this shape is going to be using only this color. However, the beauty of colored pencil is you can layer it. So you're kind of creating depth by doing one layer like we did in this lighter color, and now I'm taking this darker brown and lightly adding another layer to create some dimension. All right, well, that concludes our portrait drawing for today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you again. Take care. Bye-bye.